Here we go. So the recording has started. I also want to remind everybody that this is an opportunity to meet the finalists. This is not the screening process itself. So the City of Shoreline contracts with the King County Sheriff's Office, and the King County Sheriff's Office contracts for police services. And that means that the Sheriff's Office will review the applications, and they have forwarded candidates to the city manager for Shoreline who met the criteria and had the desired qualifications to be promoted to major in this case. So our two candidates tonight have already participated in a meet and greet session with the city's leadership team, including the mayor and deputy mayor. Then there was a formal interview process with the city's department directors and two representatives from the Shoreline Police Precinct, as well as a formal interview with the city manager. Earlier today, both candidates also participated in a formal interview with a community panel, and that consisted of 6 representatives who either reside in or operate a business in the Shoreline community. Those community panel members represent the geographic, ethnic, and economic diversity of our Shoreline community. The city manager has also debriefed with each of those interview panels, and following tonight's forum, she will take all of that feedback from the process along with her own assessment of the community and the organization's needs and consider all of that in the selection of a new police chief. So there may also be a final interview with the city manager, and she will make the final selection for police chief, and we're hoping that she'll be able to announce that to the public by the end of September. All right, the order for the candidates to speak this evening was chosen randomly, and we would like to introduce you to our first candidate who should be visible on your screen tonight, Captain Kelly Park, who is already with the Shoreline Police Department. Thanks for joining us.
And Natasha, if I could just interject, let's just share the 2 slides because we didn't have a chance to get them up,
Sure.
just to recap how the webinar tools will work.
Okay, go ahead and pop those up. So this shows you where to find that button to do the interpretation. It should be along the bottom part of your screen. If you are not seeing this, you may need to make it full screen since sometimes it hides those functions. And then choose the closed captioning, the interpretation, and then the menu to see all of the languages that are available with our interpreters this evening. All right. Okay. All right, well, Captain Kelly Park, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're going to go ahead and jump right in and start your 10-minute timer here. Feel free to take as much or as little of that 10 minutes as you would like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what drew you to this role.
Thank you, Natasha. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I've been very excited going through this entire process. But a little bit about myself. First and foremost, I'm a proud wife and mother. I've got 3 teenagers, 2 of my own and 1 bonus. So I'm a busy lady outside of this role. As far as my background in this department, this is my 20th year with the King County Sheriff's Office and my 4th term here in Shoreline. I have been in every role you can imagine here in this city and consider this home. This has always been home base. When I was brand new in training, I did the majority of my training here in Shoreline. And then I quickly contracted with the city as a brand new rookie deputy. And after I had my first kiddo, I had the opportunity to do some different things. This is an extremely large department. We have lots of opportunity, and went out to the city of Woodinville and became their first school resource officer. I got to build that program from the ground up. And after a couple of years of doing that, I promoted into an investigative role there in Woodinville and stayed with the contract until I was encouraged by my peers and encouraged by some of the younger deputies that I'd been a mentor to take the plunge and promote to sergeant. I ended up #1 on that promotional exam list and had the unique opportunity to not do what we normally do with brand new promotions, which is to send folks back to patrol operations. Rather than doing that, the sheriff at the time decided to put me into a specialty role. So I went to the King County Courthouse and led the court protection unit downtown. Had an opportunity after that to become the advanced training sergeant for the entire department. You'll probably hear my theme tonight. I'm an absolute huge advocate for training and love it, and see high value in our training program. But it gave me an opportunity to participate as a subject matter expert in several disciplines across the county. This department, if you're unfamiliar with it, we run on ancillary help. So we don't have dedicated units to our TAC division, for instance, or dedicated instructors for driving and so on. If you have a unique opportunity or skill, you have the opportunity to go in and do these special things. So I took full advantage of that. And I joke that I have 12 different jobs with the department. I really do. After being down at the advanced training unit for some time, I decided it was time to get back to Shoreline and spoke with our former Chief Ledford. He was happy to have me back, and I became a patrol sergeant here in the city. A year and a half into that, I was asked by our former undersheriff to go and do the job that no cop wants to do, and be an investigator for our internal investigations unit. It's a difficult job. It's not one that people seek out to do. And it was one of the greatest learning experiences that I've had in my entire career. It's about holding us to our own standards, fact finding when allegations of misconduct are made, and holding people accountable. With that, I was encouraged again to promote by my peers. I took the captain's exam and eventually promoted out of internal investigations. I've been a captain now for almost 4 years, and I've had multiple assignments. The first one, I got to go to Southwest Precinct down in Burien, and after about 6 months, I was asked to transfer to the Sound Transit Unit for their operations division. I've been dubbed kind of Miss Fix-It a little bit with this department, and there were some projects that needed to get accomplished. They had the confidence in me to accomplish those projects, and that's why I was asked to make that transfer. Funny part about it, I was told, unpack your boxes, you're going to be here for a while, and 10 months later, I was asked once again to go back to the internal investigations unit as their commanding officer. If you think about the purview of a detective sergeant, they're strictly doing investigations in that unit. As the commander, you have a much wider and varied role. I was the direct liaison with our oversight OLEO committee and worked directly for our undersheriff. It was a huge responsibility. And again, the learning experience was fantastic. In that role, you are the complaint department. And what's good about that is going into it, again, the amount of knowledge that I came out of it with was invaluable, but sometimes you learn things about what not to do. I think it made me a much better commander, and I really tried to focus on building relationships with our oversight. When at the time, there were some struggles between our executive leadership and the former director of OLEO. So just continuing to foster the relationships there that I had already created as an investigator, and then working in this different capacity. I also really tried to focus on training. Allegations of misconduct are very serious, and we have a process that everyone has to go through. With that, there is kind of a little fear and mystique behind the process. So I tried to get as much information as possible out to our department as a whole about what the process looked like, what expectations they should have, should they be subject to that process, or any allegations of misconduct made. And was an active participant too with our new sergeant school in teaching them how to take proper preliminary investigations and what their role was going to look like. After a little over a year back downtown, Tony Garza, who was a former captain here, retired, and I reached out to Chief Ledford, former chief again of Shoreline, and said, hey, I'd love to come back to Shoreline. The undersheriff, now sheriff, said, you know what, Kelly, I need you to stick around for a few more months during this transition from Sheriff Mitzi leaving and her becoming the sheriff. Once we get over that hump of the new year and the transition, I'd be happy to let you go back to Shoreline. So I've been back here now as a captain, again, my 4th term since the beginning of the year. And I've been doing both captains' roles. We normally have both an operations captain and an administrative captain. And I've taken on both of those roles here. Some of the the disciplines that I still work in when I joke about those 12 jobs is that above and beyond my day job, I'm the program manager and lead instructor for our justice-based policing program, as well as our active bystandership for law enforcement program. Two things that I'm very passionate about and very proud to be a part of. My education background, for all the Huskies out there, I graduated from UW with a degree in society ethics and human behavior. Sorry to the Cougars, but very proud of that.
Excellent. Thank you for that. You'll probably have had to do this several times over the past few days. So thank you again for walking us through it. We're going to jump right into the questions, and I think you'll find that they tie in quite nicely with a lot of what you just told us about your own background and experiences. Given the last couple of years that we've had with the pandemic and everything that's gone along with that, these questions will resonate with you, or at least you'll know why they came up in our questions tonight. So the first one is about BIPOC communities in Shoreline, which is one of the more diverse areas of our state. So data right now shows that BIPOC communities and Black, Indigenous, people of color, to get out of the acronym there, have been disproportionately harmed by King County Sheriff's Office practices sometimes. So with the contract relationship between the Sheriff's Office and Shoreline Police, if you're selected for this role, how will you build relationships with communities of color in Shoreline and other communities who have had a history of negative interactions with law enforcement?
No, thank you. I have seen the data specifically on infractions over the past few years here in Shoreline, and the numbers look terrible. There's a lot more information that we need, and I want to dive into just to get kind of to the root of what the problem is. Who's writing these tickets? Tickets should be written strictly on behavior, not on the way that somebody looks or how they present. So what is driving that? Is there a particular time of day, a particular area, even a particular type of driving offense that we need to focus on? We no longer have a traffic unit. Our staffing is just atrocious as it is for most law enforcement agencies across the state right now, even across the country. So we've had to do away momentarily with our traffic unit. We're not writing a lot of infractions anymore. We're responding to priority 911 calls, but we need to look at that historic data and figure out, what do we need to do better? What do we need to do different? A lot of this doesn't need to be just data driven. I'm really focused on having some difficult conversations, and my goal, if chosen as the police chief, is to meet with the community leaders in those diverse groups, anyone that is willing to sit down with me and give us some constructive criticism. This is very honorable work. I'm very, very proud of the work that I've done for the past 20 years. And I'm very proud of the other servants that I work with here at Shoreline Police. We give up our personal time with the family, and sometimes our personal safety to keep this community safe. But that doesn't mean we are perfect. There's still a lot of room for improvement. And anyone that's given me the opportunity to sit down with them and have those conversations, I'm happy to do it. Then we can really focus on, what are the problems? What do you need from your police servants? And come up with some measurable goals how can we actually do better moving forward, constantly looking inward. And once we've established those specific goals, taking the time to build up measurable steps to meet those goals. I don't think this is a one-person job, and I intend on working with those folks that are willing to have those conversations with me to come up with strategies and develop a plan so that we can do better together as a community and grow.
This question will build on your answer just now, because you touched on something. You said a lot of police agencies across the country are dealing with some of the same issues. So what do you think are the current challenges in the culture of law enforcement organizations in building trust with the community? That seems to be a through line across the country with law enforcement organizations. So what are those current challenges, and how do you build trust in those communities?
With all of the technology, all of the training, the equipment and education that we have now, you would think that we would be more effective than ever in enforcing law and protecting our communities. In reality, the perception from the community that we serve is that we are not being effective. I think a lot of that has to do with some significant mistakes that have been made in law enforcement across our country. We cannot ignore those. And the majority of the time, 99% of us are doing the right thing every single day, doing excellent work and helping our community. We've got a unique opportunity to make a positive change in people's lives every single day. But when one person trips and falls, it affects us all. That being said, the responsibility of fixing those relationships really does fall on our shoulders, to make sure that we're making proper connections with people. When people's, the way that they perceive our effectiveness, the majority of the time is not just by, are we making the right decision, but it's how they were treated in the process. If we are not treating people with equity and dignity, if we are not listening to them, if we are not explaining the process and explaining what it is that we're doing and why we are doing it, then we are failing. So it is really incumbent upon us to take advantage of every single contact that we have day by day to leave folks better than we found them. Meaning if you come upon somebody on a traffic stop and before you even reach the window, they're out of the window screaming, yelling, defensive, upset. They may not have ever seen you before. They may not know you, but you're wearing the same clothes that somebody else was wearing when they didn't treat them very well. So it's our responsibility at that time to make that contact positive. And ultimately, if you can walk away from that encounter, if you have to issue somebody a citation and they say thank you as we leave, it's not about thank you for writing me a ticket. Nobody wants a ticket. Nobody wants to have to deal with it. It's thank you for treating me with respect. Thank you for listening to me and being respectful.
You said something there that I think I want to kind of piggyback on. You've got a tough balance. You've got to balance the needs of the public. You've also got to balance the needs of your staff. So
Yes.
if you move into this role, what are your strategies to ensure the health and well-being of Shoreline police deputies and professional staff? How can you create an environment where officers are really encouraged to take part in things like mental health services, self-care, additional training, all of the things that go into providing those positive experiences that you just talked about wanting to provide to the residents of Shoreline?
No, thank you for bringing that up. We've done a pretty poor job historically of taking care of ourselves. This is a very stressful job. It can be scary. You can walk away and not be able to sleep at night sometimes. So it's something that we are working more toward, thinking about the long-term health and wellness of our officers. One thing that we have accomplished here in Shoreline is one of our sergeants had a proposal for a purchase of some gym equipment to add into our police station here. That seems like a small thing, but this was with the amount of hours that people are working and mandated because of the staffing crisis that we're currently going through. Even prior to that, all of the mandated extra hours folks were working during the riots. It makes it very difficult to take the time to take care of yourself. Having this gym available, which I was able to get across the finish line here early this spring, has given folks an opportunity to take better care of their physical health, tagging an extra 30 minutes before or after their shift and being able to get a little workout in, reduces their stress, helps boost their endorphins, and folks are just feeling a lot better. In addition to that, we've got a full kitchen cooking facility here because of the support that we had from the city manager in building this new facility for us. So if it's the middle of the night and fast food is the only option, it's not the only option anymore. We also are working on building our wellness program across the entire county. I've just recently finished a proposal as a kind of beginning baby step to that for a comfort dog program. We are going to launch here in Shoreline and bringing this animal into situations after crisis events have occurred during stressful times. We've got a lot of data to back up just how effective it is in bringing people's moods up and the stress down. The city is going to be launching that program soon. That is just one baby step in the right direction of building a full wellness program for our entire county. I'm a huge proponent for working on a much broader program. The Comfort Dog isn't going to fix it all. So we're constantly encouraging folks to take advantage of any resources that we have available. And a lot of that starts with conversations. So as simple as it sounds, I take pride in knowing my people and what they're going through. If folks are a little, afraid of the chain of command and want to maybe not talk to the captain about it, that's absolutely all right. So I stay extremely close to my sergeants, encouraging them to make those personal connections with their people and find out how can we support folks. Just 20 minutes prior to coming into this forum tonight, I had a young man in my office going through a difficult situation at home. So the fact that he felt comfortable enough to have a conversation with me and I was able to provide resources to him and direct him to some additional help, I'm very proud of that. And I'm just going to continue to work at that on a larger scale here in Shoreline and across the county.
Excellent. We have a question that's come in from one of the folks watching, and it touches on something you mentioned earlier about being an internal affairs investigator.
Mm-hmm.
So this person asked, since you were privy to behaviors, mentalities, and misconduct that put police under a lot of scrutiny, as police chief, what would you do to minimize or eliminate those types of behaviors? And how do you screen out so-called bad apples in the barrel?
Excellent question. That was a very unique opportunity because not only was I involved in the internal investigations process, but again, I'm a huge proponent for training. So I've tried to take those things, those common mistakes and patterns and get ahead of them. Part of that is why I accepted the program manager position for the active bystandership for law enforcement. This program essentially is both internal and external, encouraging people in a respectful and professional manner to step in if you see one of your own trip and fall, and do it beforehand if we can nip it in the bud. I'll give you an example. If someone is having a difficult encounter and you can see that your partner is starting to get emotional and maybe sucked into, a frustrating conversation, being the individual that steps in and says, hey, let me go ahead and finish this conversation with this individual. Why don't you go over here and take care of this other task? Separate them from the situation, give them an opportunity to cool down, and then give us an opportunity to change the conversation that was going sideways with law enforcement and leave it better than it was going.
Okay. And just a quick time check, we've got about 10 minutes left. So just for everyone's information, I'm going to try and fit several questions in here over the next few minutes. So you also mentioned this, there's a shortage of police officers, not just here locally, but across the country. So how would you stem the tide of officers leaving, and how would you recruit new officers and screen for good officers?
No, that's a great question. Everybody's fighting for the same pool of candidates right now. The bigger issue and my main focus right now, because we do have a slow trickle of individuals in training, a lot of folks that we are sending to the academy right now, and a big push for lateral recruitment as well. So those folks that we get here in Shoreline, we're able to train and encourage to stay. Part of that retention of keeping folks, though, that have been here for years and are experienced is, again, making individual connections with folks and finding out, what are your goals? What can we do to keep you around? I can't offer more money. I can't offer much in the way of extra days off or anything like that. What I can do is offer training, encouragement, and mentorship, and whatever interest these particular individuals have. So really focusing on, what they want to accomplish and helping to foster whatever steps they need to take to get there. I think with that is going to bring a lot of loyalty for folks that want to stay in Shoreline. In addition to that, I'm looking at the long game. If there's an individual that's interested in becoming a major crimes investigator, for instance, giving them the opportunity and tools to create that path for them to accomplish that goal is fantastic. But down the road, they're going to come back to Shoreline. And when they come back to Shoreline, they're going to bring that additional experience and make this a better working environment for all of us. So for retention, that's my main focus, working on special projects that folks have, anything I can do to encourage them to enjoy the day-to-day and kind of vary the monotony sometimes of the job. For recruiting, we are always looking for the best officers that we can possibly get here, looking for a diverse group of officers that better reflect the community that we serve. We're not just looking for numbers. The great thing about this city and this contract is that there's a lot of opportunity here that people may not have in other areas or other contracts within King County Sheriff's Office. We have an extremely supportive city and city manager. We have training money. We have money for proper equipment. We have this beautiful facility that's been provided for us, which is connected to all of our city partners. Those things mean something. And when they see that we are encouraging folks to do bigger things and have the resources to provide it, it's easy to attract the best and the brightest. We already have folks, we're in the middle right now, if you're unaware of our sergeant's exam. So they're going to create a new list for promotions. We have a couple vacancies here for sergeant's position. So I'm already out there actively recruiting and talking to folks that would be a good fit for Shoreline. So it's a day-to-day grind, but we want the best folks here.
One of the other questions that came in is about the enhanced shelter with wraparound services that is in Shoreline. The person said, I'm proud that we've got this type of shelter with wraparound services for our unhoused neighbors in Shoreline. Do you think Shoreline Police could or should support the goals of the shelter? And if so, how can they do that?
Oh, we absolutely do. We absolutely do. I met just last week with the new executive director, William, with Sandy, the long-term program manager over there at the Oaks, and with Carrie, who does our outreach work. This is a partnership, and having that conversation and talking about a couple instances that we've had over the short time that they've been up and running that have combined both our work and theirs. We talked about some things that didn't go as well as we had hoped they would, and how can we do better moving forward. We made sure that there's open lines of communication, and they can always get a hold of me if there's questions, if they need something from us, and talked about some special resources too that we may have with our radar program, which is our co-responder model with a mental health professional and the police working together. With that MHP resource, we can provide some additional support for them if needed in de-escalation techniques. And sometimes they know about some resources that others don't. So again, making those connections in partnerships is huge, but we absolutely support them. We love them and very proud to have that here in the city.
Hey, and I just got an update on our time. We adjusted things and we actually have 10 minutes. So you got a little bit more time there because we had to adjust for our glitches at the beginning. So
Sure.
maybe we can fit in 2 or 3 more questions here. So this one just came in. What does Black Lives Matter mean to you?
Black Lives Matter means that despite the diversity that we have in the city, there's a lot of differences. Humans have differences. It doesn't have to just be race. It may be gender, sexual orientation, and it is important to value each and every one of us. Meaning, if there's somebody that falls under that title, in this case, if a Black individual falls under that title of diversity, that we give every opportunity for them to have an equal chance of success in the community. That's what it means to me.
Thank you. Next question is more about youth in the community. So you talked about some previous work in that area. So this person wanted to ask, how do you prevent, or how will you prevent and reduce our young people from becoming entangled in the juvenile justice system?
My goal is to get us back in the schools. I've already been working with the superintendent's office. We had an excellent meeting a couple weeks ago, had some good introductions, and just providing any resources that we have to connect and offer to them. We're working very closely with Shoreline Community College as well. One of the programs that I'm a trainer for is our civilian response to active shooter events, so in progress violence events, and speaking to the community about imparting hope if they are involved in a situation like that, what they can do to help protect themselves and how they can survive. And part of that too is what they can expect from us in response to a situation like that. So that's something that I've been able to offer to Shoreline Community College. We've done a couple different classes over there. We offered it to the Shoreline bus drivers group as well. And they said, hey, why don't you get this into our staff and teachers and students? We were absolutely more than happy to do that and start kind of getting our foot back in the door to make those meaningful connections so we can have proactive, positive conversations and not just be responding to crisis and 911 calls. But I think having us in the schools and building and fostering those relationships is invaluable. I spoke to one of our former school resource officers, is a sergeant here on patrol on first shift. And we were talking just the other day about one of the kids that used to be in school. They bumped into one another on a call, and just how positive that interaction was. And it was interesting because he knew him from school. We had an issue of a crime that was committed that he was involved in with some friends. And in working with John, the school resource officer, he was able to work with the business that was affected, work with the kids, work with their families to come to kind of an alternative resolution. Rather than taking this directly to the criminal justice system, how can we make this right? Got all parties involved, and the end result was fantastic. Had he not had that relationship built that he had established in the school, we may not have had that opportunity. And that's just one example.
You talked earlier about the traffic division being reassigned to other duties. So a resident is asking how you propose to handle traffic issues like speeding in the city.
Right now, we still have our traffic sergeant, but he's working double duty. Charlie Akers, most people are familiar with Sergeant Charlie. Charlie still is in charge of taking those traffic complaints, issues of abandoned vehicles as well. And we're working with overtime deputies to try to address those issues still. It's not a full-time fix. It is a Band-Aid, and it's get to it as quickly as we can get to it. Once our staffing starts to build up and we get to better numbers where we're not working at minimums or below minimums on patrol every single day, that's one of our number one priorities, is to reestablish that traffic unit so that we can better address the concerns.
This next one ties in a little bit to some things you talked about earlier. Do you think community oversight programs and transparency when there are incidents and use of force can help build trust between police and communities of color in particular? And if so, how might you implement that type of program and transparency in the department?
No, absolutely. And King County Sheriff's Office is already doing that with Oleo, as our oversight.
And can you tell folks what Oleo is?
Absolutely. Oleo is our oversight unit. They come in and make sure that we're holding ourselves to our own standards and our own policies. So one component of that, when it comes to allegations of misconduct, for instance, is that they're actively involved in the investigations from start to finish. They have input in how an investigation is classified. They have the ability to look at completed investigations and check it for thoroughness, make sure there's a non-biased eye, and that we're covering everything that we need to cover. They're involved in interviews. I often brought them out, had them out here actually just last week to assist in training to make sure that we're improving on any level that we can and taking preliminary complaints. And they, even if they so choose, have the opportunity to render recommendations on findings at the end of an investigation. The way that the process works with internal investigations is that it's strictly fact-finding. So the investigators find all facts, conduct interviews, collect any evidence that's available, good, bad, or otherwise, and package it together. They're not a decision-making entity. It's about fact-finding, not inserting any type of opinion or coming to any type of conclusion. And Oleo is a partner in that to make sure that we're holding ourselves to the highest standard. Part of the benefit of that is the transparency, because they are actively involved in helping to report out annual statistics and making sure that we have all the information out there. Not trying to hide anything at all. And Olio's been a good partner in that.
You are coming in right on time right now. We've got about 3 minutes, so I'll see if you can answer this question in the amount of time that we have, and I'm perfectly happy to give up a little bit of our break time to get this done. But our final question then is, how can residents be more supportive and enhance their promotion of partnerships in safety with the officers?
Thank you for that question. I appreciate that. The reality of the situation is that we cannot do our jobs without the cooperation and partnership of our community. The community has to trust us to know that we're going to do the right thing. And when we do have to enforce laws, it's going to be done in a fair and equitable manner. We're going to treat people right. If we do that, what we need from the community is several things. We need your support at the voting times of voting, especially with the new legislation that has passed. We need support on financially to make sure that we have proper training, that we have proper equipment. We need people to report crimes. We need you to call 911, and we need you to be part of the conversations I spoke to earlier and help us come to better conclusions at the end. We cannot do our job though without the community and this partnership.
Hey, perfect. Couldn't have timed it any better. Thank you so much for your time and for bearing with us as we got rolling here tonight. Appreciate all of the insight that you shared and your willingness to really dig into the questions that folks have been sending in. So thanks again for your time.
No, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. We are going to shift gears just a little bit and get our next candidate on the line here. And for folks who have been sending in the questions, thank you. I would say probably the last 6 or 7 questions were all submitted by residents in Shoreline. So thank you for your involvement in this process and taking part in this civic effort here tonight. We're going to get our next candidate queued up. I see a box for her there. And once we get her camera and sound ready to go, we will keep rolling here.
You can hear me and see me?
We can. Thank you.
There we go.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to keep us rolling right along here. So I'd like to introduce Captain Heather Volpe. Thank you for, did I get your name pronunciation right there?
Yes, you did.
Excellent. Captain Heather Volpe, thank you so much for joining us. And we're following the same format with you. You'll have about 10 minutes to tell us a little bit about what drew you to the role. And then we'll go into about 25 minutes of questions before we wrap up this evening. So I'll go ahead and toss it over to you. What drew you to this role?
That is a great question. First of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor just to be a finalist in this process. City of Shoreline. I started with the King County Sheriff's Office. I should back up. I started with the city of Bellevue back in 1999 and came to King County in 2005. When I finished my training, I got moved to our North Precinct, and the first thing people said to me is, you need to go to Shoreline. And I'm like, I trust this. So I came to Shoreline to work as a patrol deputy. I came over, worked graveyard before we did all those wonderful advancements on Aurora, when it was still no sidewalks and pretty much a 2-way left turn lane from 205th to 145th. I was here for a number of years as a deputy working graveyard, and then I became a member of the traffic unit. And I fell in as an administrative sergeant. I filled in as a deputy for that position that was vacant. Our sergeant was called up to the military, and I was asked by our chief at the time, Dan Pingree, to fill in, which got me introduced to the city of Shoreline and the community of Shoreline. And I truly enjoyed my experience. I oversaw our quartermaster, which is all our equipment here in Shoreline. But again, I got to work really closely with the city and see a different side of law enforcement in connection with Shoreline. During my time, Shoreline embraced their officers as their own. We're contract workers, and the fact that Shoreline made you feel connected with the city was a wonderful experience. I left Shoreline for other opportunities. The sheriff's office does offer a lot of opportunities as a school resource officer, which looking back is one of my more rewarding positions that I've had in law enforcement. Having that connection with the youth, being in classrooms, engaging and having a different connection was really rewarding, fun, challenging at times, entertaining at times. Kids are fantastic, can be very entertaining. I went back to work in unincorporated in patrol. And then I made a decision that I want to go back to Shoreline. Shoreline was a fantastic place to work, and I really wanted to come back. And I did. I came back to Shoreline. I worked swing shift, which is your afternoon shift, and then went to graveyard. I became a master police officer here, which is a trainer. I've enjoyed training new officers and enjoy receiving someone that's having some struggles or challenges, finding creative ways to connect with them and have them excel and be successful. And I think that's very rewarding. I was a master police officer for a number of years here. And then I was promoted sergeant. And with the King County Sheriff's Office, you tend to get placed in a new work environment. They tend to want to separate you. I was fortunate to stay here at Shoreline. I was the rarity, and I was so fortunate and happy about that. And I continued working as a sergeant here in the city of Shoreline and continue working. I became the traffic sergeant, which again got me very connected with the city. I have very fond memories of my time with Shoreline and also the opportunity. Past command, Chief Ledford, Chief Pingree was always encouraging and supportive of ideas from any layer, from a deputy, a detective, a sergeant, and opening those conversations. And that's something I really thrived in and really appreciated that encouragement from my upper command and the community, how supportive they were and eager to be part of the city of Shoreline. When we got moved to the city hall, that was a wonderful experience to really see that commitment the city had with our officers, because we were part of city of Shoreline. I was promoted to captain. Before becoming a captain, I was working in the internal investigations unit, which was a great opportunity to see a little bit more behind the scenes of how things function within the department, issues that are coming up and around the area, and truly understand the investigative part of a complaint. I was promoted, and my first assignment was an administrative captain for the King County Sheriff's Office, overseeing our records unit, court protection unit, and our property management, which was a big step for me. It went from supervising 8 to 15 people to over 100. That was a huge step for me. And then I moved into being the commander of our 911 communication center, which was again, more additional responsibilities. And I oversaw the entire center of nearly 100 employees, had my own information technology department, my hiring, recruitment, retainment. And I really enjoyed having that responsibility of overseeing a group. Currently, I'm at our Southwest precinct, which is our busiest precinct. I asked to go there. When I was leaving the communication center, they asked, where do you want to go? And I'm like, Captain Park's taking Shoreline, so my next best thing is the Southwest precinct. So that's where I've moved, and that's where I am now. When the opportunity came for this position, I was excited about it. I wanted to come back to Shoreline. I jokingly call it my boomerang city. Come back to Shoreline. And with the amazing opportunities I've had over the years with leading a 911 communication center and the responsibilities, I enjoyed the ability to innovate, to implement, and having that freedom to do that. And as the chief of Shoreline, I can continue the great work that Shoreline Police does and will continue to do. And those are the main reasons why I was excited to come back to Shoreline as the chief of police.
Nice. And I am seeing a message from our technical staff that I will try to adhere to myself. I'm a kind of a fast talker, so I will apologize. I will try to slow down a smidge here. Yeah, we've got, and thank you to all of our interpreters. I want to say we've got quite a few, maybe upwards of a dozen or so who are working tonight, in addition to the ASL interpreter that we're seeing on screen. There are several others that are working hard behind the scenes, so I apologize for my speed earlier, and we'll try to keep that in mind as we go forward into the Q&A section.
I'm sure it's directed to me. I'm a fast talker, and I'll be mindful. When I testify in court, they're like, slow it down, so I will be mindful of that.
No worries. And we will try to get through as many of the same questions as we had for the previous candidate to give you both the chance to weigh in. Folks have, very similar concerns for both of you. So I'll start off with the same one we started off with last time around data for the King County Sheriff's Office showing that BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color, have been disproportionately harmed by King County Sheriff's Office policies and procedures. Mm-hmm. So with that contract relationship between the Sheriff's Office and Shoreline Police, if you are selected for this role, how will you build relationships with communities of color in Shoreline and other communities who have had a history of those negative interactions with law enforcement?
Yeah, it's interesting to me that audit, I was an active participant in. So the data determined with that audit, it was an interesting process that I got to see the process and then the results. And I remember some challenges that we faced with the information that they were seeking for this audit and the data that was so necessary for this audit that we simply couldn't provide due to our lack of ability to collect specific data. This is a conversation that has started. It's a conversation that we need to continue. And with the city of Shoreline, this data is so broad. It's for all of King County. Well, how specifically is Shoreline impacted? And how specifically is Shoreline in these numbers? And I know we had over 1 million contacts during this time period. And because of King County ordinances and some challenges, we have limited information, which is frustrating. It's frustrating for us as law enforcement to be able to better identify where we need to focus and where exactly is the harm is a broad statement and we want to understand more. I like details, I like data, and to not have that, you want to pinpoint more of what direction do we need to focus on. The moving forward is we need a better system. We need a better system in collecting this information to make better determinations of our next steps moving forward. Previously, my position at the 911 Center as the commander, obviously I worked hand in hand with this audit and understood what they were looking for. And the conversations we had where they were asking, we need to find this data. And I'm like, we can't create that data, unfortunately. I want to be on that table and in that conversation with the decision of where we go as a department to collect information, what systems we will use, and as a representative of Contract City, ensuring that Shoreline's interest is represented, but also that of the greater good of King County. And being on that panel, being in that selection process is vital. And with my background and knowledge, I think it's instrumental to be part of that. But where do we go right now with Shoreline? Potentially, we can pull some of this data and do specifics for Shoreline. It is moving forward as we're acknowledging, yes, these are the numbers. This is what is clearly an issue and a conversation. I just want more so we can have a better conversation of where we need to direct ourselves and where we need to focus ourselves. But that's a couple years out. We don't have a couple years to wait. And so this is where we have to reach out to our communities in Shoreline and ask them, how are your experiences? What are you experiencing? Where are we going from here? And including more conversations so we can at least create a concept to move forward with.
Shoreline's a very diverse city, lots of different viewpoints there. We've seen that even tonight in the questions that we're receiving. The next question is about current challenges right now in the culture of law enforcement organizations with building trust in the community. So how would you go about changing that culture as a police chief? And they're asking about your methodology and your steps as a new leader. And I'd like to piggyback on that. There's a culture, there's a trust challenge with folks who think the officers are doing too much and those who don't think they're doing enough. So if you can thread that needle and solve that problem for us this evening, that'd be great. I'll let you answer there, but how do you, what are those current challenges in building trust with the community and how do you change it if you're selected as police chief?
I think that's an excellent question. And I think there's a couple parts to it. I think right now for law enforcement, some of the challenges are an unclear direction of law enforcement, and it's hindering us from building that trust and moving forward. A little bit about me, I have believed throughout my career that I have been proud to serve the communities as a police officer and believe, and I'm surrounded by amazing individuals with the same goal and purpose is to help and ensure the safety of our communities. And over the years, we have found better ways to serve our communities, new options and resources, tools, procedures, and conversations were being started in communities on equity and diverse communities years before George Floyd based on other incidents. When the events of George Floyd occurred, it left me stunned and frustrated that the profession I was so proud to be part of and the actions of these officers and the national conversation made me hesitant to acknowledge my connection in fear of assumptions being made about me based on the actions of others. And it was a new reality for me. I initially took the conversation as I must be a bad cop, I must be a bad person. But in my heart, I felt like I was doing such good for the community. And being told, all cops are fill in the blank, except for you, Heather, you're a good one. That was hard to take because I'm like, but I work with so many amazing officers and deputies. The communities, we agree. We need new options. We need new resources. We need to have better connections with our communities. And it is frustrating to know that these years of policies and procedures I followed are being questioned now. I'm saying that's not the right way to do it. And now we're questioning everything we've done over my career, which is almost 24 years. I support the need for alternate call handling. I think every officer wants to have the right resource for the right call. If someone's having behavioral health concerns, having a mental health professional talking to that person over me in uniform, hands down, I would prefer that. Now, we have to make sure we're mindful of their safety and safety of others. But having the idea and those concepts, we want change. We agree that there needs to be change. But moving forward, just like working on trust with our communities, our officers are feeling a little, like for me, I had to then question my career of everything I believed that I was doing well and supporting my community and wanting to make them safe. I began questioning myself, am I a bad person? And the message, and even having conversations with my kids. My husband is a commissioned officer as well. And my kids going, I saw that sign, all good cops are dead cops. Why would my mom and dad need to die? And having those hard conversations, but good conversations on what we can do better as a society, the justice system improvement, and the different parts of the conversation that expand even outside of law enforcement. But moving forward, I think there's trust that needs to be gained with our community, but I don't think we can forget that the officers need to gain some trust too. We need to have that conversation, and any good conversation has two strong parts in the conversation that both have to be interactive. We need to meet and have conversations with the communities and understand and actively listen of what do they need and why do they need that. Just like I want members of these communities to have conversations to actively hear what the police need and why. We have laws and ordinances we must follow. There are certain procedures we have to do to ensure our safety, and making sure we all can flow between each other with conversations of, I understand your challenges, but hear me out of why I have done that. Because I think communication is so vital, but it really needs to be a complete conversation with everyone at the table having that conversation. So what would I do as the chief of police? I want to have that conversation. I'm supporting my officers. I want to give them the confidence that as we implement new laws, new policies, that they're important. The community, we all have the same goal, and that is safety in a community and unity in a community. And we need to reach there. But again, I think we all need to be part of the conversation, and both sides being very active listeners to each other and having an understanding of the different perceptions and experiences that everyone has had. And that's the way we can work together to heal and move forward.
This next question builds on that a little bit. You talked about officers needing a certain level of support. What are your strategies to ensure the health and well-being of Shoreline Police deputies and professional staff as the ones who are being tasked with this big shift right now in what we expect of law enforcement? How will you create an environment in which officers are encouraged to take part in things like mental health services, self-care, additional training, new understanding of those policies and procedures that have been one way for, as you said, 24 years in your case, but now they're shifting a bit? How do you help your staff with that?
I think the first thing is, when we hear the message over and over again, we start to hear it, right? Maybe once we hear about it and then you're in that moment, you're like, where is that resource? And what I think it is, awareness is vital. Awareness of options. There are some amazing organizations that are strictly support for first responders, ER nurses, firefighters, police, having those numbers and those messages throughout the precinct of an anonymous call you can have if you just need to talk to someone. At our roll calls, consistently having those conversations and reminders of what's out there. Because when you get into that moment going, today is not a good day for me. And that's not the time to start Googling things or starting to go through past emails to try and find, Chief Volpe said this 2 months ago. No, it needs to be one of those repetitive messages, and it needs to be kind of a common conversation to have. At our roll calls before your shift, having code 4 come talk, our peer assistance team talk. There's not one fit for everyone when it comes to dealing with the stress and the adrenaline highs and lows we have on duty and the experience our professional staff gets to hear about, see, and finding the right fit for that individual. I think we all know for behavioral health, there's not one answer for everyone. There's such a uniqueness for each individual. Shoreline is fantastic. They have a gym here for working out, which is vital for recovery from shifts. We have a full kitchen here, and also the encouragement of healthy eating, exercise, and conversation, having sergeants being mindful of their teams, checking in with them, having those conversations. It's not just one thing, it's a collection of things as we move forward. And when we do have a critical incident, we require you to go to what we call a critical incident stress debrief, which is run by mental health professionals. And it is an opportunity for officers, dispatchers, call receivers to all come together and discuss what was occurring, how they were feeling, how they're doing, and moving forward of, hey, it's normal to feel this way. It's normal to feel that way. In the start of my career, I had a critical incident and we didn't have that same support. And I just reached out to a senior deputy and I'm like, I'm having a tough time with this. And it wasn't kind of accepted at the time that you do that because you're showing weakness. And that's a cultural thing that we need to work on. And as we continue to grow, there are many officers and deputies that openly share their story. Will openly talk about experiences and how much talking to someone, therapy, or other options and avenues have truly helped them. And that's my plan as moving forward with Shoreline.
Excellent. I am going to try and do a little bit of a speed round and get us through some more of these questions. People have been so generous with their time this evening, not only in watching this and taking part and sending in questions, but really being thoughtful about what they're asking and what they want to know of, the two candidates for police chief. So the next question has to do with the enhanced shelter that is in Shoreline. So this person said, I'm very proud that we have this shelter with wraparound services for unhoused neighbors in Shoreline.
Yes.
Do you think Shoreline Police could and should support the goals of this shelter? And if so, how can they do that?
I think it is those conversations. I was talking with some city employees that work hand in hand with the shelter, and I was discussing this. I'm like, what is going well with the shelter and how is the police connected? And they're like, they're not really connected right now. Well, that's where we're having conversations and sitting down with how can we better support the shelter and utilize them and be partners together with the shelter. I think it's a fantastic service and much needed. I remember working graveyard and having nowhere to send anyone. I mean, the closest thing was in downtown Seattle. To have this amazing resource in our community is a wonderful add. Like I said, I left Shoreline when we're starting our revamp of Highway 99. I come back, it's all completed, and they were starting to do Sears. And now I've come back, we have an amazing 24-hour shelter and all these other wonderful resources for our community.
Excellent. And just a quick time check for us. We've got about 12, 13 more minutes with you. So if that helps in framing your questions, I'm going to keep going through them here. The next one is, what does Black Lives Matter mean to you?
Black Lives Matter means to me, that's a really good question. What that means to me is there is a conversation, and I don't mean that lightly. My kids, so when I talk to my kids instantly said, Black Lives Matter are against police. And I'm like, no, that's not at all what they're about. Black Lives Matter is addressing an issue, a bigger issue in our communities, and not just with law enforcement. It is a conversation about the criminal justice system. It's a conversation about equity within schools, within healthcare, within so many different areas, that it is sometimes messaged in the way that is specific for law enforcement. That's not the full picture. The full picture is the totality of this community and how they've been impacted, and moving forward and wanting to move forward and doing that mindfully. So to say they're against police, I don't think is a fair thing to say. And I think that's the wrong assumption to have.
We'll move now into some questions about youth in the city of Shoreline. What will you do to prevent and reduce youth becoming entangled in the juvenile justice system? And what is the police department's role in supporting and protecting schools? Kind of a two-parter.
Okay. The first for the juveniles, we have options when we are interacting with anyone under the age of 18 to work with the families. So when we have situations that come up, talking with either the guardians, parents, or caretakers of these juveniles and working with the family first is an option in many circumstances. Depending on the severity of the incident, it may not be an option. I sometimes find there's positives with being part of the juvenile justice system, and people are like, wait, what? It is because new resources are available. There are families that I've interacted with that had limitations on what they could do to support their child that had behavioral health challenges, unable to identify what specifically that is. And once they were actually in the system, they were able to get their child diagnosed and get the right resources and work with the prosecutor that charges don't need to necessarily go forward. Let's make this child better and be able to build off of that. So when we think of the juvenile justice system, it's not just we're arresting you and we're putting you in jail. It's a new system with opportunities for families, and it's opportunities for individuals to get more help and more resources. With the schools, I was a school resource officer. Absolutely loved the connection I had with the high school that I was connected with. And there was wonderful things that came out of that conversation is the students having trust with me, having conversations with me. I would like to bring back some sort of liaison with the school district, having a consistency with law enforcement, having to call law enforcement to your school and consistently getting a different person depletes the consistency. And I think it's helpful to have a school that has a consistent member, not a school resource officer that's working in and out of the school, but when things are coming up and law enforcement is needed to be called, it's ideal to have a consistency. And I think that's really necessary and a familiar for the staff, for the students, for everyone.
This gets back to staffing levels. This is a challenge that we know affects law enforcement across the country right now, not just here in King County and Puget Sound. So because of a lot of the vacancies within the department, the traffic division has been reassigned apparently to other duties, or there's just one person doing it. How do you propose handling traffic issues like speeding, given that shift in staffing?
So part of my history is very involved with traffic. I was a collision reconstructionist. So I was the major team that would come back to, I have a strong passion for traffic safety. I think that's paramount for any community. Seeing that the traffic unit had to be displaced for staffing is frustrating because I know it's so important for the community. Well, what I would like to see is that we work with our traffic engineers to identify the major collision sites and have our officers assigned to areas to know the causal factors of those collisions to be able to focus to help improve our road safety. Also ensuring the training for speeding is a device, a LiDAR, and you have to actually go through training to use that. We've got a lot of new officers here. I want to make sure they're all trained and current, make sure we have the appropriate equipment to give those tools to our officers. Those classes can be sporadic, but I think that's something that we need to do. As we move forward with sound transit and the trains, traffic is going to increase. Parking challenges are going
Natasha and Heather, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just going to pause for a second. I believe we have a Spanish interpreter in the English channel.
Oh, okay. I was wondering. Okay, give us 1 sec for those who are joining us online and watching.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay.
Sorry for the interruption. You can continue.
As we move forward, we need to have emphasis on traffic. We're going to have increased volume of vehicles on 185th, 5th Avenue Northeast, 175th. And we need to find a way to work the solution. And that is important to me.
Excellent. Thank you for that. The next question is about community oversight. So do you think community oversight programs and transparency when there are incidents of use of force can help build trust between police and communities of color? And if so, how might you implement such a program and increase transparency in the department?
I do believe that it helps add transparency and partnership. OLEO, our Office of Law Enforcement Oversight, when I was in our internal investigations unit, at first I had a wrong conception of that group, of what their role is. And they truly were there to ensure we were following our procedures and investigations, ensuring our neutrality within those investigations, our transparency of those investigations, and that we are being mindful and we're being timely. And we're doing that both for the community, but also for our officers. And everything's open and available to the community to review along with the audits afterwards. Our findings. So findings are a complaint comes in on an officer, an investigation is conducted. And in the city of Shoreline, I, as the chief, will review this investigation, make a determination. Am I sustaining the allegations against the officer, providing training, punishment, or some sort of recourse? Am I exonerating them, saying they met the guidelines within our policy and handled the situation well? I make that determination and I have to write a justification for that. And then that goes to OLEO, it goes to that oversight, who again is making sure we're just following the rules. We're following what we're doing, which I think is a good thing. Coming to Shoreline, we have that OLEO option through the contracts, through both our deputies and with our command staff as well. So we do have a great resource there. If there was something additional that Shoreline was looking into, I would be very curious how we would implement that, especially being a bargaining item within our contracts and our unions, but to grow off of OLEO and maybe providing more information from OLEO specifically to the community of Shoreline and finding a way to get that information to Shoreline a little bit more clearly.
Excellent. We are doing great on time, and I just have one more question here that's come in. They came in from one of our residents who are watching tonight. How can residents be more supportive and enhance the promotion of partnership with the police department with safety?
That's a really good question, because we're always talking about how we can gain trust, and I'm getting the what can I do to make the officers and gain that trust? I think simply writing a note, sending it to the police, that is volumes for an officer, just to see a message from a community member. When you see them at a call, saying thank you and smiling, and just a wave with a smile is really goes a mile with every officer. I've had days where I've struggled. There've been some tough calls, and I look over and there's a sweet 5-year-old just smiling and waving at me, and that just kind of fills you up to keep going. So I think those simple things really mean the world to every officer out there, or sending a note saying thank you, officer so-and-so, or just I appreciate what's going on.
Well, that concludes all of our questions for this evening and those that have been sent in tonight. I want to thank you for your time and for sharing your background and your insights with us. I know you've had you and the other candidate have had a very long day meeting with the public, meeting with leadership. We appreciate you taking the time. Yeah.
And I apologize for talking too fast. That is a problem of mine. I apologize.
No worries.
I'm sorry, interpreters.
We were all learning and getting through this together tonight. So I want, on behalf of the City of Shoreline, I want to thank all of our interpreters who joined us this evening. Thank you all who tuned in and sent in questions. I hope that we got most of them asked tonight and answered. And just as a reminder, the city manager will be taking all of this information, the information that came in from the questions tonight during this public forum, as well as all of the interviews and meetings with city staff during the day, and we'll combine all of that into their decision on who's chosen for the next chief of police for the city of Shoreline. On behalf of everyone who joined us here tonight and made this public forum possible, thank you for joining us. Have a good evening.